let's talk about some Viking stuff. I got this cool article that I found about how Vikings was actually a job description and not, in fact, hereditary. Here it is. Viking was a job description, not a matter of hereditary. Massive ancient DNA study shows. Study reveals family histories of black-haired Vikings who set forth and died far from home. That is pretty dope. There's a, let's see, DNA from Viking-era burials around Europe, like this one of a woman in Varnhem, Sweden, revealed individual histories and identities. It was a Viking saga written in genes. In 2008, construction work on an isolated Estonian beach near the town of Salm uncovered the skeletons of more than 40 powerfully built men. They were buried around 750 CE in 2 ships with Viking-style weapons and treasure, apparently the aftermath of a raid gone wrong. DNA from the bones has now added a poignant detail. 4 of the men, buried shoulder to shoulder holding their swords, were brothers. The new DNA comes from a massive effort to sequence the DNA of Vikings across Europe. The results, published today in Nature, trace how the Vikings radiated across Europe from their Scandinavian homeland, and how people with roots elsewhere also took up Viking ways. The big story is in line with what's told by archaeologists and historians, says Erika Hegelberg, an ancient DNA expert at the University of Oslo, who was not part of the research team. It's the small details of the particularly sites that are really compelling. The Estonian site, for example, offers powerful evidence that the crew was a tight-knit group from the same village or town. 4 brothers buried together is new and unique, and adds a new dimension, says Kat Jarman, an archaeologist working for the Museum of Cultural History in Oslo, who was not part of the research team. Over the course of almost 10 years, a team led by geneticist Eske Willerslev of the University of Cambridge and the University of Copenhagen assembled samples from across Scandinavia dating to the Viking Age, from about 750 CE to about 1050 CE, Common Era, for those who aren't familiar, as well as some earlier and later samples. The team also gathered human remains from burials elsewhere in Europe and beyond that had Viking grave goods or burial styles. We approached every place where we could see that there should exist an association with Vikings, Willerslev says. Ultimately, the team was able to sequence 442 Viking age genomes from as far afield as Italy, Ukraine, and the doomed Viking settlements of Greenland. The results tell dramatic stories of individual mobility, such as a pair of cousins buried in Oxford, UK, and Denmark, separated in death by hundreds of kilometers of an open ocean. The genetic details may also rewrite popular perceptions of Vikings, including their looks. Viking-age Scandinavians were more likely to have black hair than people living there today, and comparing DNA and archaeology at individual sites suggests that for some in the Viking bands, Viking was a job description, not a matter of heredity. Here's an awesome map here that shows the age of exploration. Viking ships sailed forth from Scandinavia, traversing the waterways of Europe and reaching across the Atlantic Ocean. Vikings from different homelands preferred certain destinations. For example, men from Norway settled Greenland. DNA data now show. Now you can see, actually, this is Sweden here, and then this is Norway right next to it, and then Denmark. So this is really, I mean, Scandinavia, right? Which is where, and it says here, is the Viking homeland, is this color. And then here's all these dots here are the Viking age, and then medieval dots, I guess actually they're way over here. There's some here, and then deep into Europe too. I guess this is over in like maybe Prague, Czechoslovakia. But then you can see settlements and raids and trading, which is all over the place. Basically all of Iceland, over here in Finland, or maybe this is Finland actually, and then Poland is over here. All of Greenland, really cool. Viking-style graves excavated on the UK's Orkney Islands contained individuals with no Scandinavian DNA, where some people buried in Scandinavia had Irish and Scottish parents. And several individuals in Norway were buried as Vikings, but their genes identified them as Sami, an indigenous group genetically closer to East Asians and Siberians than Europeans. The Sami, in fact, live in North Sweden. I'm fairly certain on this. They are very different than what you think Swedes nowadays. I mean, most modern day Swedes live in the southern 20% of Sweden. Sweden's really long and goes really far north, but Stockholm, for example, is really, really far south in the span of the country. And most people live at Stockholm and below. And the Samis live up in the far north, which makes sense that they would be more similar to the Siberians and East Asians. These identities are not genetic or ethnic. They're social, Jarman said. We have backup for that from DNA is powerful. The results also settle a centuries-old argument about the geography of raiding. Sagas written down centuries after the first expedition suggest Vikings from certain regions favored specific destinations, but other scholars suggested the Viking command of the waves made them equal opportunity raider and traders. DNA at hand, researchers for the first time could conclusively trace the origins of people from far edges of the Viking diaspora back to their roots in Scandinavia. We can follow the patterns of contact suggested by written sources, but disputed by historians for decades, says co-author Soren Sindbeck, an archaeologist at Aarhus University. They found that Vikings from what is now Sweden moved east to the Baltics, Poland, and the rivers of Russia and Ukraine, whereas Danes were more likely to head west to what is now today England. Norwegians were most likely to set sail for the North Atlantic Ocean, colonizing Ireland, Iceland, and eventually Greenland. That is a detail one couldn't do based on archaeology, Wiverslev says. To the team's surprise, there was little evidence of genetic mixture within Scandinavia itself, although a few coastal settlements and island trading hubs were hotspots of genetic diversity. Scandinavian populations further inland stayed genetically stable and separate for centuries. We can separate a Norwegian person from a Swedish person from a Danish person, Sindbeck says. The DNA has raised new questions too. Study co-author and National Museum of Denmark archaeologist Jet Arnborg says DNA recovered from burials in Greenland shows a mix of Scandinavian men from what is now Norway and women from the British Isles. Yet the artifacts and burials look completely Scandinavian. The women have British genes, but we can't see them in the archaeology, she says. The DNA is going to make us think more about what is happening here. Other mysteries remain. Viking settlements in the Americas have not yielded bones for sequencing, leaving the identity of the first European settlers in Americas a mystery. And to the east, more samples may help illuminate the role of Vikings in the origins of the early Russian state, a topic that remains extremely politically charged, Sandbeck says. This data has the potential to resolve some of these debates. That reminds me, I have another article that let me just find real quick because it pertains to this, to the Americas. So according to this study, the New York Times just came out, ancient footprints pushed back the date of human arrivals in the Americas 23,000 years ago. 23,000 years ago. So long before the Vikings, actually. And they have new evidence of this. Human footprints found in New Mexico are more than 23,000 years old. A study reported suggesting that people may have arrived long before the Ice Age glaciers melted. There it is, fossilized human footprints that a White Sands National Park program manager first discovered. Now that is in fact a long article, but I find it very interesting to know that we think we know our history and we're finding more and more stuff out as we go, and we've still got a long way to go, if you ask me.